Hello everyone. Today in this video we are going to cover few more financial cross topics: validations and substitutions, data archiving and data aging. Validations and substitutions. In the SAP S4 HANA system, we use validations to perform checks on the data entered by a user in order to protect and prevent erroneous postings for those cases in which you create a standard check for data entered. So, validations are used for the purpose to validate the data which we have entered in the document entry. And substitutions are meant to either fill fields that are left blank or change the entries in the fields filled with values different from those defined in the substitution rules. So substitution is used to substitute a value which is already entered in the document or with the value which is left as blank, or to fill with a value which is left as blank. So validation we perform whether the entered data is correct or not, and it throws an error, but in substitution it checks the value and replace it with the correct value. So in this chapter we will analyze how to define validations and substitution rules, as well as how to maintain sets and rules to use in the definition of validation and substitutions. So overview of validations and substitutions. If we see in the screenshot, these are the application areas where we use validation and substitutions. So validations, if we see here, mainly we use validations in financial accounting, asset accounting and cost accounting. And in finance, we can, these are the application areas, and there are few call-up points for which we configure the validations and substitutions. That is for document header, line item and complete document. So now let us see the theory part. Validations and substitutions can be defined for multiple application areas as shown. So the most relevant areas for financial accounting consultant are the financial accounting, asset accounting and cost accounting. So in this chapter and in this associate certification, the focus is on financial accounting. Validations and substitutions are valid for specific call-up points. So the important ones to remember are the document header, line item and the complete document. So if we see the screenshot again, activation of validations and substitutions for company codes. How do we activate validations and substitutions? So activation level, if we see here, we can see the activation level. One for document header, 2 for line item and 3 for complete document. And this one near to the call point, we are selecting as whether it is inactive whether the validation is inactive or active with no batch input. And also if we see the substitution, even for substitution, it shows the call up point, whether it is a document header, line item and complete document, and the activation level. I think in the first screenshot the screens were incorrect. The first one, the call up point, is document header, line item and complete document, and activation level is inactive, active and active no batch input. So for both the validation and substitution, these are the screens where we configure whether it is active or this validation needs to be created for which call up point. So to use a validation or substitution that you defined, you assign it to the company code in the customizing. You can assign a single validation or substitution per company code and call up point. For each validation or substitution defined, you also define the activation level, whether it is inactive, active or active with no batch input. Active and with no batch input is like the validation will be active, but it will not be active for any of the batch input sessions which is created by the user. So when defining the validations and substitutions, you can define multiple steps. The system runs through each step at the call point sequentially and raises the first message for validations. For substitutions, the system will perform all changes and updates to fields per call up point without the user taking any action. If the first message raised from a step in a validation is a warning and the user ignores it, the system will continue running through the steps and raise the next message if any. The system won't display all potential validation problems in a single output. You have to take care of each one as you go. So this is the example for validation. So the validation name and the validation step 1 and the prerequisite and check and the message. For the easiest way to understand what a validation steps looks like and which components it is made from. So we can see this figure. So it is made of components prerequisite, check and message. That means here we can see that the step refers to a specific validation rule and is made of the following. So prerequisite should be like the user in the BKPF, it is at header level. At header level, the user should be this or this. SEHMIDTK or Mueller P. So if the users, if the condition met for either of these users, and also check whether the document type is not SA. When these users for these users from this validation, what do we understand is these users can be posted only to document type SA. If they are not trying to post other than document type SA, it triggers the error message, do not use document type SA. So if these are the users, this is a prerequisite. Now we will check on substitution. So if we see this, unlike validation, so validation we checked that it has prerequisite check and message, but here in this there will be prerequisite and the substitution. So let us take a closer look at defining substitutions first, because they are generally more straightforward than validations. Some of the concepts discussed here apply for validations as well, which we will analyze later. A substitution uses a rule to change the value of a field, whether already filled or empty. The substitution is stronger even than a manual entry or default value. So what actually the substitution does is it will substitute a value which is already entered manually or which is automatically populated by default. But if there is any rule, any substitution rule related to that field, it will substitute the value with the existing value, and also it is stronger than the manual or default entry. So for the substitution will always be performed if the prerequisite is met. So if the prerequisite is met, then it will perform the substitution. So what is the prerequisite in the screenshot? It is like BKPF. It is nothing but header data. It seems like it is a document type. If document type is equal to SA, very broad prerequisite, please assign carefully. So it is like document type. So there will be, it is not specific, it is for whole document, like it's a document type SA and no other prerequisite we are checking here. So the substitution will always be performed if the prerequisite is met. If the document type is SA, so for all the document types you are going to for all the document types which is SA, again for all the documents which has document type as SA, we are going to change the substitution field. A substitution will work for fields even if they are hidden in the screen definitions. The value will be written in the document header or line item field defined when the prerequisite is met. Can contradict a validation or some other normal journal entry. Check at the time, definitely we will get an error message. This leads to an error because the substitution value must be entered and the value is causing a problem. The only solutions are to change the posting in a way that is allowed, change the validation, or if possible system check message, or change the substitution step. Something we have to change. If it is throwing an error that is because of validation or substitution or with already the existing configuration, we need to check with the business and need to change the configuration as required. So we can see in this example, so if the document type is SA, the document reference field, the field is reference, is substituted. Reference field will be filled with system date. So field is substituted by field reference, field is substituted by system date. This is a substitution. To define such a step, you create a new step within the substitution assigned to the relevant company code at the document header column point. When creating a new step, the first thing you maintain is the field that you want to substitute. The system provides a pop-up screen in which you mark the field or fields you want to substitute. The list for selection depends on the column point. For example, you would have a different selection of fields to choose from for the line item column point. As this is a header column point, all the fields included in the header are displayed here for selection. If we are doing a substitution for line item column point or a complete document, it depends, means like only the fields available in the lineup column point will be displayed, or if it is a complete document, both the header and line item fields will be displayed for selection. You then select the method with which the field value will be filled by the substitution. You then select the method with which the field value will be filled by the substitution, whether it is a constant value or we are going to call any exit like user exit or field assignment. So you can select from the following options: constant value, exit, and the field assignment. So prerequisites for substitution. So these are the prerequisites for substitution. Shows the options you have for building the prerequisites. So now we will check prerequisites for. So prerequisites for substitution. So this is like document type should be SA, and actually we thought the reference field should be populated with system date. So here we can see the options you have for building the prerequisite with the formula builder. The formula builder allows you to write code in a guided and protected manner. So the formula builder only allows you to select the functions that make your prerequisite syntactically correct. So from a code level, at least the syntax will be correct. So we have to write our prerequisite step with the formula builder, which helps in writing the prerequisite correctly with the syntax. In the top section of the screen, you enter the prerequisite code. You use the field selection at the bottom left of the screen, which proposes fields that are valid for the column point to select fields. You can add the operator from the list of the operators at the right of the screen, equal to, larger than, different, etc. So whatever we feel is required for our substitution rule prerequisite, we will be selecting those values from this screen. You can define values by selecting the operands at the bottom right of the screen. And also if we see here, we have operands from the like constant, field comparison, comments, set directory. So the final step is to assign the substitution value per the selected method. So if we see, the final step is to assign the substitution value per the selected method. So the figure shows the field selection for a field-to-field substitution method. So figure shows the complete definition. If the prerequisite is met, the system will fill the field reference in the document header from the current date field. It's a field-to-field substitution method, field transfer def substitution. So reference and the system date. If the prerequisite is met, reference field will be updated with current date. And now validation definition. So just now we have covered the substitution. For substitution it is very simple. There will be a prerequisite and a substitution. And for validation there will be a prerequisite and it will check, and if the check is not true then it will populate the error message. As shown in the validation example earlier, validation steps have an extra check stage compared to substitutions, and they output a message instead of changing a value for a field. You can see the sections maintained for the validation. In this example, if the general ledger account and the cost centers are in specific sets. If we see here, it's the line item HKONK, which is the general ledger account. So we have updated the sets here. If this general ledger account is in this set SNDL underscore GL and this cost center is in set SNGL underscore CC, the system checks that the internal order is filled in. If this combination, like if this is the GL and this is the cost center, there should be an internal order filled in, and so that we will check. If not, the system issues an error stating that internal order must be filled. So it will check. There should be a value. If this is the combination, like if this is the GL and this is the cost center, so internal order must be filled. So is not equal to space. So is not equal to space, it will provide the error message. Sorry, if it is a space, it will provide the error message. You can see the sections maintained. Okay, if not, in this example, if the general ledger account and the cost centers are in specific sets, the system checks that the internal order is filled in. If not, the system issues an error stating the internal order must be filled. The prerequisite is built in the same way as that for a substitution in the formula editor. The same tool is used for building the check section of the validation. You select the message class. The messages are taken from in the validation definition. In each step, you assign the valid message or create a new message within the message class that fits the step validation. An example of message creation is shown later in this section. So both the prerequisite and check we will use the formula editor, but for displaying the message we will be creating that in the message class. A message can be one of the following types. Might be an cancel, error, warning and information messages. So what is the check here? Is not equal to space. Then it is Okay, if it is equal to space, then it throws an error message. In the example shown in figure, you wanted to make use of variables. You would formulate the message as such: with the combination GL account and cost center, you must enter an internal order. The message variables would be set to the following: message variables. So, general ledger account and the cost center. The system would then output the values entered by the user for the general ledger account and cost center in the message. The final option on the message assignment screen is to select the trigger workflow indicator. This way you can design workflow scenarios based on validations. For example, that a user is notified if an amount is exceeded for an invoice, or that the user responsible for a cost center is notified when certain expenses are posted to their cost center. So if we see this is the message for validation. So validation step 1, check order not empty. So this is the message class. Message type is error and message number message. Enter an internal order, and here we will update the message variables. When creating a text for the message class, this is the message definition. When creating a text for the message class, you select the message number and write the short text. You can select the self-explanatory checkbox. This indicates the message has no long text assigned because the short text is an adequate explanation. Alternatively, if the message needs extra explanation, you can maintain a long text to flesh it out. So, maintain individual messages: person responsible, last changed, and the date. So, here we will be creating the message number 000, enter an internal order. So, this message number we will be entering in our configuration step. So that's how we define the validation rules like prerequisite check and the error message. So how do we create set? Sets are used to group together values for specific dimensions. So if we want to group all the GL accounts into one group, we will create a set and we will assign all the GLs into that group. To define a set, you enter a set name and reference a specific system table. In this example, we are using AC Doka. Then you select a set type. You can also reference an existing set to speed up the set definition. Basic set. And in the basic set, you define value ranges for a specific field. So multi underscore GL CC table. In this, there will be SNDL, GL, and field name, and the cost center and the field name. If you want to give the range, this make it easier to include ranges of data in validations and substitutions. So this is where we create the sets. But if we see this, you will get a little bit confusion, like there is one screenshot missing. So if we see the screen, the set which is getting created, we can even add the value ranges for a specific field, and also we can create a multi-set. This is a single set and this is a multi-set. This is a different set. This is not included with this set. Rules definition. Now, how we can reuse the rule? You can think of a rule as an validation or substitution function module. It is a piece of code logic that you can embed into validation or substitution prerequisites and validation checks. Instead of writing the logic in the validation, you create a rule with the same exact logic. The advantage of doing this is that you can assign the same rule to multiple steps instead of rewriting it every time. Another reason to use rules is that you might have a complex piece of logic code with many lines, and using a rule can keep the code of the prerequisite or check cleaner. You can see an example rule definition in figure. On its own, the rule doesn't do anything. It must be embedded in a prerequisite or check to be useful. So it is a call up point 1 and the user, and if the T code is FB01, this is the prerequisite. So this rule we will use in our validation prerequisite step. So these are the few things related to validation and substitution, which is very basic, and this information is enough for our associate examination. And now we move on to data archiving part. So we might have heard more about this archiving. Whenever we need to save the storage space, we will archive the data and we will free up the space. With data archiving in an SAP S4 HANA system, you can remove application data from the database that no longer needs to be actively accessed in day-to-day activities. The data isn't deleted with data archiving, and read access to the data is provided. The data is transferred from the database to the external storage media so that it can be accessed for analysis. Cleaning up old data is a good practice. You might consider archiving for the following reasons: saves memory space and reduces related performance problems, keeps the database more manageable, ensures cost efficiency, enables faster downtime cycles for the system, allows access and reuse of data later. As is the case in the example in figure, you assign a life to archiving object to ensure that you are less likely to archive data still in use. Your role as a financial accounting consultant is to advise and work with a system administrator to configure the need for archiving in financial accounting and the life of the financial accounting relevant archive objects. When archiving an object, the system writes the relevant data to the archive file and stores the file as configured. In the final step, the data archived is deleted from the active database. So archiving example, journal entry life per document type. Document type is maybe 5. Document life is 5 FB or a check. General customizing for data archiving. Data archiving is configured and executed by a system administrator. So it isn't important to know details for each configuration step. So configuration involves the following: storage locations, cross object, customizing. So cross object customizing, data archiving monitor, active, check access for archive selection, for files in file system, verify archive files before deleting, before reloading, and job classes, statistics database based archiving statistics. So this is defining archiving storage, assignment of physical paths to logical path. Okay. Object specific customizing for data archiving. So we will use the general ledger account as an example for performing the archiving object specific customizing. You can see some of the additional archiving objects for financial accounting in the figure. Archiving objects. When GL master data, vendor, customer, bank master data, financial accounting documents, electronic bank details. The settings you define for an accounting object shown in figure. So what is the logical file name? Maximum size in MB, test mode variant or live mode variant start automatically. So object specific customizing, you define for an accounting object logical file name and maximum size is 15 MB, and test mode variant, live mode variant, delete jobs start automatically. So this is object specific customizing. Logical file name for performing data archiving. To archive a general ledger account, you enter the life number of days to keep a general ledger account per company code, account type and account range. General ledger account type per company code, account type and account range. Life is 365 days. Before executing data archiving, you must set the marked for deletion checkbox in both the chart of accounts and the company code. You don't need to block an account, but it's a good idea to do so. You use the archive administration tool to process data archiving and create the archive file. The steps are as follows: create an archiving variant, specify the execution user which requires the right authorizations, specify the start date and time, define the spool parameters for log printout. So we are creating an archiving variant and specify the execution user, so which requires the right authorizations, specify the start date and time and define the spool parameters for the log printout. Archive variant. So archive variant will be like chart of accounts, company code, GL account, and production mode. So then system outputs the requested logs defined in the archive variant. You can select a log to view the details. So this shows the detailed archiving log in which the general ledger account is confirmed to be archived for the company code. So archive file key, number of written data objects, change GL account master data has been archived. After archiving, the general ledger account isn't defined for the company code as shown in figure. The deletion from the chart of accounts requires a separate run. Okay. So this is how the data archiving works for a particular GL account. Now moving on to data aging. The data aging for financial accounting documents. The data aging process transfers data from the in-memory section of the database to the traditional disk drive. In this section, you will gain an overview of data aging and learn how to configure and perform data aging for financial accounting documents. Although SAP HANA is an in-memory database, this doesn't mean all data stored and used by systems running on the SAP HANA has all data in memory. That is just not cost effective, and because the total amount of memory supported by the current servers and operating systems is finite, might not even be viable. The same applies with SAP S/4HANA, which is no doubt a large application with many customers posting thousands of financial accounting documents daily. With the data aging functionality, the system can move data that are deemed not required for daily real-time processing operations to more traditional disk drives. Example, magnetic disk tapes or solid state drives. Data aging is primarily a database function. However, you activate it on the system level and configure it for the specific data of the different applications. You can use data aging for financial accounting documents. So in this screenshot, that data aging for financial documents. In the first column, we can see that partition in memory. The partition is like document A if it is 2 years old, document type SA, and account type yes, no performing aging, and document type B, document B 1 year old, no, and document C is 1 year old but it is document type AA and account type A, we are going to perform the aging. You define a minimum life per account type and document type for which the system is to keep the documents on current data layer. When you run data aging for the financial accounting document object, the system checks against the rules configured and decides which documents are moved to the historic partition. This is illustrated in the figure. We have seen that in the previous slide. All the documents and line items moved to the historical partition of the database are available for reporting. When you define report selection options that include data that has been aged, the system will retrieve the data from the disk drive it is stored in, incurring the analogous speed penalty. Data aging customizing. To use data aging, you must activate it in the SAP HANA database and in SAP S4 HANA system. Yeah, data aging customizing. So to use data aging, you must activate it in the SAP HANA database and in the SAP S4 HANA system. You then perform the required configuration steps. To activate data aging, you enter the business function switch framework in customizing and activate the DAAZ data aging business function. You mark the planned status checkbox and select activate changes. The business function is reversible, meaning you can choose to turn off data aging without impacting the system's usability. You also need to have a user with the appropriate authorizations assigned. Authorization objects S underscore DAAG and S underscore DAGPTM are required. There are two standard roles provided. SAP DAAG as admin is assigned to system administrators and SAP DAG expert is assigned to users responsible for scheduling the aging runs. The SAP S4 HANA system comes with predefined data aging objects. For financial accounting, you activate the FI document object as shown in figure. You customize the document life per company code and account type. So this is again an important question. So how do you customize the document life? We will customize the document life per company code and account type. You can enter an asterisk to indicate settings valid for all company codes. The account life you enter here is in days and you can enter up to 4 digits. So to use data aging, you must activate table partitioning and set up at least 2 partitions because the current and historic data must be on separate partitions. Figure shows the transaction in which this is done. This is an admin task. Finally, you define a data aging group. Here you can add multiple objects that you want to run in a single data aging run. You enter a sequence number and the object. Sequence and the object, and here we can add multiple objects which we want to run in a single run. So this is not basically a data aging group definition. Here we can see group ID and data aging group and multiple data aging objects. Data aging run. How we do this run? When everything is configured, you can perform the first data aging run. In the application to manage aging runs, you select the option to schedule a new run. So in this figure we can see the username and the group are set ready for the run and the printing spool parameters. We can monitor the success of the run from the application by refreshing the view and reviewing the log. Special SAP Fiori dashboards are available for monitoring data aging groups and objects. However, without requiring SAP Information Lifecycle Management, you can also use the data browser to look at the entries in the table AC Doka. Here, the data filter value for data aging field uses the posting date as a timestamp for data aging. The lines with this field filled are aged and have moved to the historic partition. So this is the data aging result. So we can see here. So there are SAP Fiori dashboards available for monitoring these aging groups and objects. So without requiring SAP Information Lifecycle Management, you can also use the data browser to look at the entries in the Universal Journal table. The data filter value for data aging field uses the posting date as the timestamp for data aging. Data filter value for data aging field uses the timestamp for data aging. The lines with this field filled are aged and have moved to the historic partition. You can see the table here and field in the figure 6.71. So when this field is updated, it is an indication that this document is already moved to the historic partition. Continue certification related. So the first question is related to the validation. What is the maximum number of steps possible in validation? Choose the correct answer. So the maximum steps is possible in validation is 999. Identify the application areas where validations and substitutions can be used. So we know that financial accounting, asset accounting and cost accounting, these are the three application areas where we can use the validations and substitutions. You want to define a validation for the combination of ledger account and cost center. For what point of call is this validation defined? So this will be in line item, so it is of line of documents. Identify the application areas where validations. So this is the same question again. You want to create a substitution in financial accounting. Which parts do you have to define for each step of the substitution? So we have to prerequisite and replacement. What steps are required to create a substitution in financial accounting? So assign the substitution rule to the controlling area. No. Select the correct column point. Choose the area of application GL. Activate the substitution rule. Define the substitution rule with its different steps using the formula editor. I feel it is B, D and E, but I don't know why they have selected C, D, E. Identify the reasons for archiving data. So you lowering the effort involved in database administration, using data as a backup, no. And improving response types and ensuring good response times, yes. Reducing the system downtime when carrying out software upgrades, recoveries and database backups, yes. Identify some of the checks for archiving GL accounts. So we have to set the deletion indicator and we need to check whether there is any documents and any transaction figures and not the fiscal year closed. If the deletion program is not executed automatically by the settings in archiving object specific customizing, the delete job is started every time an archive file is created. Yes, delete job is an important step. Which of the following components make up an archiving object? So they're saying like programs, data declaration part and customizing setting. Your customer wants to use data aging for the universal journal. Your customer wants to use data aging for the universal journal. Which criteria can you use to decide which data is moved to the historical partition? So it can be like account type company code or document type company code. Any of the options is possible. Which requirements do you need to fulfill to use data aging for finance? Which requirements do you need to fulfill to use data aging for finance? We have to activate aging on SAP HANA S, and we need to add required authorizations S, and activate data aging for your company code. Now switch on data aging business function S. So we did the financial cross topics, configuration settings and certification questions. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will meet in the next video. Thank you so much.